seemed that in 1988, when Doctor Who went off the air, calling the final episode of McCoy's run Survival might have been tempting fate. But despite going off the air, the series still survived. While never hitting George Lucas levels of spin-off material, Doctor Who had always maintained a healthy expanded universe. Even after 1988, the series carried on in books, comics, and even a proposed animated show by Canadian animation company Nelvana in 1990, which was intended to be a continuation of the show sustained by merchandising. According to Ted Bastien, or Bastien, I apologise, I can't understand your crazy name there, the show never got off the ground, due to another British company moving in and claiming they could do it cheaper and better. The rights were handed over to them and the series vanished off the face of the earth. It would have been your typical 90s Saturday morning cartoon, and while no scripts exist, it would be unfair to say how the show would have gone good or bad, though the concept art did suggest it would have been far different from the familiar show we are used to, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about what really led the show through the enduring wilderness years. Founded in 1998, they originally began adapting some of the Seventh Doctor's early spin-off novels before moving on to producing scripts from McGann. Though that's really a very abridged history. Big Finish has a long and complicated history with Doctor Who, mostly due to legal rights. But despite this, writers and producers like Nicholas Briggs were able to eventually secure the full rights to Doctor Who to be able to produce a plethora of stories. Which leads us to what we're talking about today. My favourite Big Finish stories. More specifically, what is known as the main range. Those stories just being Doctor Who. As to date, Big Finish have produced a lot of audio stories, and not just for Doctor Who, which would lead us to the main range title, but, we're getting ahead of ourselves. They've done things for Frankenstein, Dorian Gray, The Avengers, and Dan Dare. So, they do way more than just Doctor Who. Anyway, in no particular order, let's take a look at a brief look at some of my favourite picks from the main Big Finish range. When people talk about Big Finish, it's hard not to mention these two. And of course, they have to be mentioned together as they form the ending of one massive story arc and begin something even more bigger and complex. The Doctor, face number 8, and his current companion Charlie go through a complicated affair of both going mad and saving Gallifrey from something rather horrible, which was made by, Rassilon. The result, however, is the Doctor is cast out into a strange other reality where time isn't linear, and space is a bit odd as well. While Zagreus is a charming, surreal Alice in Wonderland story, with Charlie being hurled from event to event with the TARDIS using the image of the Brigadier to talk to her, because, shush, that's a thing. Shazzo is much darker and deals with complex ideas and themes that not even either the new or old show has tried to touch upon. The Doctor and Charlie become trapped in an endless void, only ever able to walk forwards into a blinding light. Together, they travelled on, sustained only by strange corpses they find along the way. It's a chilling tale, with a strong contrast. While previously the story had a full cast of Doctor Who alumni in Zagreus, Shazro features only McGann and Fisher. The supporting cast, in this case, are the strange and unearthly foley they find along the way. It's a terrific story. Just don't listen to it at night on your own. Something much, much lighter now. We love canon in this series, and we love crossovers. So what about an episode within an episode? Well, that's what Return to Telos offers us. When the TARDIS is hijacked by the Cybermen and drawn to their ancestral homeworld of Telos, the Fourth Doctor and Leela only manage to escape by throwing themselves into the past, just in time to arrive during the events of the episode Tomb of the Cybermen. It's wonderfully fun and charming to hear Fraser Hines perform his perfect impression of the late great Patrick Troughton, the Second Doctor, allowing for us to just touch upon the nostalgia of both a wonderful man and a great, great Doctor Who story, and one of my personal favourites. It's even more predominant as a story for Tom, as he only ever got to fight the Cybermen once in his original run being the Doctor. So it feels fitting that he should finally get to not only defeat the Cybermen in a rather stylish fashion, but also having so many nostalgic classic Doctor Who actors return, and even, a wonderful tribute to Patrick along the way. What? Don't tell me you don't know that David Warner was the Doctor? Yeah, right after Richard E. Grant and those other blokes we saw from The Brain of Morbius. Okay, not quite. delving off the beaten track, we find ourselves in what we call the Unbound universe. Think of it as Big Finish's What If universe, where things are changed up in this timeline. The Second Doctor started his exile decades later than he was meant to in the War Games. Thus, all the events that the Third Doctor was meant to stop happened, and Earth is in ruin. But that's a story for another day. While travelling with Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, retired of course, this incarnation of the Third Doctor and the Brig arrive on a oddly familiar desolated planet. And who's to meet them there? Daleks, of course! But what are they up to? Oddly enough, they seem to be making themselves at home with the native Thals. It seems that just a few short years after the Doctor's faithful visits, but these Daleks aren't acting like Daleks. What are they doing teaching the words of this Davros bloke? It's an interesting tale, showing that the alternative timelines are full of twists and interesting surprises. The Harvest is a strange episode. At least, to me, it feels a little odd. If you made a Venn diagram of the three major components that made up of this episode, it would be Big Finish, Classic Who, and New Who. And I don't just mean that because it's a Doctor Who production. The Harvest sits somewhere in the middle, and mostly because, well, everything works so well. It could be perhaps the best two-parter for the new series or a classic four-parter for the old series. The story is told from the perspective of Hex, a new companion joining the Doctor and Ace, joining up after the trio uncover mysterious goings-on in a London hospital. The opening heavily focuses on the character of Hex, and listening to it again, it strongly reminds me of the New Who opener Rose, giving this little day in the life before everything goes to hell. The classic elements come into play when we discover that there's something very sinister going on in the morgue. Bodies are going missing, and soon the hospital becomes the classic base under siege as everyone tries to survive a menacing old foe who has a very sinister agenda. Well, there's only one way to describe this story. Basically, the 5 Doctors on steroids. From 4 to 8, we get an adventure with all the Doctors saving the day together, and as well as making the afternoon of one unfortunate man named Bob Dovey very miserable. Also, 5 breaks the roof of a house. One day, while travelling through the time vortex, the 8th Doctor and Charlie are in the TARDIS as it passes through a particular date, the 23rd of November 1963, and very suddenly the TARDIS explodes. Only it doesn't, but it still did. What's happening? Well, it seems that 8 and Charlie weren't the only ones to suffer this fate. All the Doctors seem to be going through or landing at that particular date. And what do they find there? Well, spoilers. Suffice to say, it's an unusual affair. A battle to save themselves. Only this time, everything they've also done is going to be undone from history. And it's only a matter of time before even the Doctor is removed from all of space and time. This story was written for the 50th special, and while multi-Doctor stories aren't super rare for Big Finish, one on this scale was a fantastic undertaking, and I was very glad to get my hands on a copy of it. Amazingly, with all the characters and nostalgia, it's not a cramped story at all. Everyone has their own moments to shine, and it's a wonderful celebration of the series using the audio format to great effect. If you ever want to get into Big Finish, this is the perfect place to start. So, that about wraps up my own thoughts for Doctor Who. The Big Finish audio stories, at least the ones I could whittle down. Honourable mentions go to The Silver Turk, The Trouble with Drax, Cuddlesome, The Wrong Doctors. Oh god, I could be here for ages. You know what? Let me know in the comments section below, what are your favourite episodes? Or what stories would you like to see from the old Virgin New Adventure stories which never made it? I know there are certainly some things I've never touched upon in Big Finish. I've still yet to even look at the Big Finish range for Bernie Summerfield. That's a whole new level of stuff, and I've still yet to finish start Doom Coalition. I've just finished Dark Eyes, so, there's a lot to touch upon. Anyway, I've been Ben. This has been my look at Big Finish's Doctor Who, or at least, my favourite stories. Until next time, stay beautiful, stay awesome, stay safe. And remember, subscribers get more with BigFinish.com.